she said, "I ain't pretty, but I can cook," the giant rancher answered. "That's enough for me." Clara had always been practical. She didn't care much about looks or fancy clothes. What mattered to her was food, family, and hard work. Ever since she was a little girl, she had loved cooking. She could make the simplest ingredients taste like a feast, and there was a quiet pride in seeing people enjoy what she made. But Clara also had her doubts. She didn't see herself as pretty. When she looked in the mirror, she only saw plain brown hair, freckles, and a shy smile. Still, she had something else, something that gave her confidence. Her cooking was her gift, and it was enough for her to feel proud. Her life had been quiet until the day she decided to take a trip to the nearby ranching town. She had heard stories about it from her cousin, who had grown up around cattle and wide fields. Clara thought it might be a place to learn new recipes, meet different people, and maybe find a little adventure in her life. She packed a small bag, tucked her apron inside, and loaded a basket with fresh pies, biscuits, and preserves she had made the night before. She wanted to give the townspeople a taste of her cooking. The morning was crisp when she arrived. The town had only a few streets, lined with wooden shops and low buildings. Horses trotted past, and the smell of hay and livestock filled the air. Clara felt nervous but excited. She clutched her basket tightly and walked toward the first farm. Her plan was simple: introduce herself and offer her food, hoping to make a good impression. She had never thought about romance or love. She only wanted to be accepted for who she was and share what she loved. The first farm she approached had a large barn and fields that seemed endless. A man was repairing a fence when she arrived. He was enormous, taller than anyone she had ever seen, with strong arms and hands that looked like they could lift a horse if needed. His hair was dark and slightly messy, and his eyes were kind but careful, as if he watched the world with quiet thoughtfulness. Clara froze for a moment. She had never expected to meet someone like him on her first stop. "Good morning," she said softly, holding out her basket. "I made some pies and thought maybe you'd like to try one." Her voice was small, but there was honesty in it. The man looked up from the fence, brushing a bit of sawdust from his sleeve. He smiled, a gentle and warm smile that made Clara's heart beat a little faster. "Well, that smells good," he said. "I'm Jackson." "You made all this?" "Yes," Clara said, nodding. Then, in a quiet voice, almost to herself, she added, "I ain't pretty, but I can cook." Jackson blinked, then laughed softly. Not a loud, mocking laugh, but a real, genuine one that made her feel at ease. "That's enough for me," he said. Clara's cheeks burned. She had not expected such a response. Most people she met either ignored her or judged her for being plain. But Jackson, he didn't seem to care about appearances at all. He only cared about what was in the basket, and, somehow, what was in her heart. She offered him a pie, and he took it carefully, as if it were something precious. They talked for a few minutes, and Clara felt the strange warmth of connection. She learned that Jackson had been running the ranch on his own since his father passed. He worked hard, long hours, and rarely took time for himself. Yet there was humor in his eyes and a kindness in his manner that made her feel comfortable. Over the next few days, Clara visited the ranch regularly. At first, it was just to deliver food and watch Jackson work. She liked seeing the way he moved, strong and steady, handling horses and tools with ease. But soon she began to help. She learned to carry hay bales, mend fences, and feed the animals. At first, it was difficult. Her hands ached, and her arms were sore. But Jackson never made her feel clumsy. He guided her gently, showing her the right way to do things, correcting her mistakes without ever being harsh. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in months. The work was hard, yes, but it was honest. And it was rewarding. She liked the rhythm of ranch life, the sound of the wind through the fields, the smell of fresh hay, the quiet moments when only the animals moved around her. Jackson was always nearby, sometimes talking, sometimes just watching, a silent but comforting presence. One evening, after a long day, Clara prepared a simple dinner for both of them. She had cooked beans, roasted vegetables, and a small pie. They ate together at a wooden table under the open sky. The stars were beginning to shine, and a soft breeze carried the smell of the land. Jackson complimented her cooking, and she smiled, feeling proud. "You really are something," he said, looking at her with a mixture of respect and fondness. "You don't know how rare it is to meet someone who works this hard and still keeps a heart like yours." Clara's eyes widened slightly. She had never thought of herself as remarkable. I like to cook, and I like to help," she said softly. "That's more than enough," Jackson replied, and she felt her stomach flutter. It wasn't romantic in a dramatic way yet, but there was something gentle and real about it, something that made her heart feel safe. Over the following weeks, their friendship grew. Clara felt more confident, not because of her looks, but because of her abilities, her kindness, and the respect Jackson showed her. She started experimenting with new recipes, bringing fresh ideas to the table, and Jackson was always eager to taste whatever she made. She also learned more about him. Jackson was quiet, but he had stories. Funny ones about his childhood, tender ones about his family, and sometimes serious ones about running the ranch and the responsibilities that came with it. Clara listened, fascinated by the life he led and the man he had become. One day, while sitting on a hay bale and watching the sunset, Clara admitted something she had never told anyone before. "I've always thought I wasn't good enough. Not for people, not for love." Jackson looked at her, his eyes soft. "Clara, it's not about looks. It's about who you are. And I can see that you're honest, kind, and hardworking. That's more than enough for anyone who matters." She felt a warmth spread through her chest. His words were simple, but they meant the world to her. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible or plain. She felt seen. As the days passed, Clara continued to help around the ranch. She learned the rhythms of work, the quiet moments of peace, and the simple joys that came from sharing life with someone who respected and cared for her. Jackson continued to watch over her, sometimes teasing, sometimes guiding, but always steady and reliable. Part of Clara's heart began to hope, not for dramatic romance, but for a life where she could belong, be herself, and be appreciated for what she truly offered. The first day she met Jackson, she had thought she was offering pies to a stranger. Now, she realized she had found a connection that went deeper than anything she had expected. And it all began with a simple truth. She wasn't pretty, but she could cook. And Jackson had said that it was more than enough. That single moment, simple and honest, marked the start of a friendship, a bond, and perhaps something even more meaningful. As Clara lay in her small room that night, thinking about the day, she smiled softly. For the first time, she felt that maybe being herself was exactly what mattered, and that was a feeling stronger than any she had known before. Clara had settled into a routine at the ranch. Mornings began before sunrise, when the sky was still soft and pink, and the air smelled fresh with dew. She rose early, tied her hair back, and joined Jackson as he walked through the fields to check the animals. She had never imagined herself living this way, but now the rhythm of ranch life felt natural and comforting. Her first task was usually feeding the horses. She carefully measured oats and hay, speaking softly to each animal. the horses had taken a liking to her gentle touch, nuzzling her hands and nudging her shoulder in greeting. Clara felt proud, not because anyone else noticed, but because she knew she was helping. Jackson often watched quietly, a smile hidden in his beard, admiring how naturally she moved and how she treated the animals with care. After the morning chores, Clara helped with the garden. The ranch had a small patch of vegetables and herbs, and she enjoyed tending it almost as much as she enjoyed cooking. She learned which plants grew best in the soil, how to water them evenly, and how to pull weeds without disturbing the roots of other plants. Jackson sometimes joined her, leaning over to examine a plant, pointing out a small mistake, and then letting her correct it. Their laughter often filled the garden as they worked side by side. Jackson had always been a man of few words. He preferred action over speech, and his presence was calm and steady. But around Clara, he seemed more open, more willing to share the small details of his life. He told her about the early mornings he had spent learning ranch work from his father, the long nights spent mending fences, and the times he had struggled with loneliness after his family passed. Clara listened carefully, fascinated by his stories, not because they were dramatic, but because they revealed the man behind the giant rancher. One afternoon, Clara was preparing lunch in the small kitchen. She had learned to make simple meals from scratch: fresh bread, stews, roasted vegetables, and desserts that could rival any restaurant. Jackson entered quietly, leaning against the doorframe and watching her work. He didn't speak at first. He simply observed, his eyes softening with appreciation. "You make it look easy," he said finally. Clara chuckled. "It's not always easy. Sometimes it takes hours just to get it right." "I don't care about the time it takes," Jackson replied. "I care about the love you put into it. That's what makes it taste so good." Clara's cheeks warmed. She wasn't used to hearing compliments, especially not about her heart and effort. It made her feel valued, not for her appearance, but for the care she put into her work. That simple acknowledgement from Jackson strengthened her confidence more than she could have imagined. Life at the ranch was not without its challenges. Some days, the weather made work difficult. Rain would soak the fields, mud would cling to their boots, and chores that normally took an hour could stretch into the whole day. But Clara faced each challenge with determination. She didn't complain, even when her hands were sore and her clothes were dirty. Jackson noticed this resilience, and it only deepened his respect for her. He had met many people in his life, but few had the combination of strength, humility, and kindness that Clara possessed. One morning, a stray calf had wandered far from the herd. Jackson and Clara spent hours searching the fields, calling for it and checking fences. Clara's voice grew hoarse, and her legs ached from running across the uneven ground. But she refused to give up. When they finally found the calf stuck in a shallow ditch, Jackson quickly lifted it, and Clara helped guide it back to safety. Both were exhausted, but a sense of accomplishment filled them. They had worked together, side by side, and had saved the calf from danger. That day, Clara realized how much she trusted Jackson and how much she valued his steady presence. Evenings at the ranch were quieter and more intimate. After the chores, Clara often prepared dinner while Jackson rested or repaired tools. The kitchen was small, but it had a warm charm. Clara loved the way the light fell through the window, casting soft shadows across the wooden counters. She would hum while she worked, stirring pots and chopping vegetables, while Jackson occasionally peeked in, teasing her about her singing or offering suggestions for seasoning. They began to share more personal stories during these quiet dinners. Clara talked about her family, her childhood, and the dreams she had once set aside. She revealed small fears and insecurities, the ones she had never told anyone else. Jackson listened with patience, never interrupting, offering only encouragement. In turn, he shared memories of his father, lessons he had learned, and moments of vulnerability he rarely revealed to anyone. It was in these exchanges, simple yet profound, that their connection deepened. Clara also started noticing small details about Jackson that she hadn't before. The way he ran his hand through his hair when thinking, the subtle kindness in his gaze, the way he carefully measured his words. She admired his strength, but even more, she admired his quiet integrity and honesty. Jackson, on the other hand, found himself observing her in new ways. He watched how she moved with grace despite the hard work, how her laughter could brighten even the most tiring day, and how her determination never faltered. One afternoon, a neighbor from the town came to visit the ranch. She was curious about the new girl who had been helping Jackson. They spoke briefly, exchanging polite words, but Clara could sense the curiosity and admiration in the neighbor's eyes. It was the first time she realized that others saw her differently too, not just as a plain young woman, but as someone capable, strong, and caring. She felt a small surge of pride, though it was quiet and contained. As the days turned into weeks, Clara and Jackson continued their routine. They worked together, shared meals, and laughed over small mishaps. The farm was demanding, but the work became a backdrop for a growing friendship. Trust and understanding flourished naturally between them, without the need for grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was a steady, reliable connection, one built on respect, kindness, and shared experiences. Clara began to notice how much she looked forward to each day at the ranch. The work was hard, but it was meaningful. The conversations with Jackson were comforting and enriching. Even the simple act of preparing a meal or feeding the animals became a joy, because it was shared with someone who valued her effort and cared about her well-being. Jackson, too, was changing in ways he hadn't expected. He had been used to solitude, relying only on himself for company and support. But Clara's presence brought warmth and light into his daily life. Her dedication, laughter, and gentle nature reminded him of the importance of connection and the joy of sharing life with someone who truly understood him. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, reflecting across the open fields. Clara leaned back, feeling the ache of the day in her muscles, but also the contentment of a life well lived. Jackson poured them both a glass of water and handed one to her. "You've done well today," he said quietly. "I can't imagine this ranch without your help now." Clara smiled, a quiet blush on her cheeks. "I'm glad I can help," she replied. "It's more than help," Jackson said. "You make it better. You make it feel like a home." Those words lingered in Clara's mind long after the sun had set. For the first time, she felt truly appreciated, not for her looks, but for who she was, what she could do, and the heart she put into everything. Their friendship continued to grow, built on the shared rhythm of work, meals, and quiet moments of reflection. Clara no longer doubted her worth. She saw that being capable, kind, and genuine mattered far more than any outward appearance. And Jackson, in turn, learned that love could begin quietly, in the details of everyday life, in the trust built through shared effort, and in the simple pleasure of being with someone who truly cared. By the end of the second month, Clara and Jackson had established a steady, comforting routine. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts, and their bond deepened without the need for dramatic declarations. It was a love that grew slowly, naturally, and surely, built on respect, shared work, and the quiet joy of being together. And Clara, once unsure of herself, finally realized that she was enough. Every morning she would wake with purpose, and every evening she would rest with gratitude. And through it all, Jackson was there, steady, caring, and patient, reminding her every day that the simplest truths often held the deepest meaning, that love, respect, and trust were more valuable than any fleeting notion of beauty. The days at the ranch had become long and full of rhythm. Clara woke each morning before sunrise, and Jackson was always there, already moving through the fields, checking fences, feeding the animals, and inspecting the crops. Clara had grown stronger and more confident in her work. Her hands, once soft and unaccustomed to labor, had toughened from carrying hay, mending fences, and hauling water. Her movements were more deliberate now, each action practiced, yet natural.
One morning, as Clara was tending the vegetable garden, she noticed the sky turning dark with heavy clouds.
The wind shifted suddenly, and the air smelled of rain. Jackson came out of the barn, holding a rope and glancing at the horizon. "A storm's coming," he said calmly. "We need to secure the animals and the fences before it hits." Clara nodded, her heart quickening. Storms could be dangerous in these parts. Animals panicked easily. Fences could break and fields could flood. She didn't hesitate. Together they ran to the barn, leading horses, cows, and goats inside, calming them with soft voices and gentle hands. Jackson directed her efficiently, but she noticed he never rushed her, even when urgency was in the air. His patience reassured her, and she trusted his guidance completely. The wind picked up, and rain began to fall in heavy sheets. Water streamed across the fields, and some fences threatened to collapse. Clara and Jackson worked tirelessly, tightening broken boards, repairing posts, and guiding animals to safety. Mud soaked their boots, rain plastered their hair to their faces, but neither stopped. They were a team, relying on each other's strength and knowledge to protect the ranch. At one point, a young calf panicked and ran toward the flooded edge of the field. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, she sprinted after it, slipping in the mud. Jackson was right behind her, steadying her with a strong hand. Together, they guided the calf back to safety. Clara's chest heaved as she caught her breath, but there was relief in her eyes and a flicker of pride. They had saved the animal. After hours of relentless work, the storm passed, leaving the ranch wet but intact. Both were soaked and exhausted, their clothes heavy with mud and rain. They sat on the edge of the barn, catching their breath. Clara laughed softly, a mixture of relief and fatigue. Jackson smiled, brushing water from his hair. "You handled that well," he said. "You didn't hesitate, even when it got dangerous." Clara shook her head, trying to downplay it. "I just did what needed to be done. You were there too." Jackson's gaze held hers. "We did it together." That's the important part. In that moment, Clara realized how much she had come to rely on Jackson. It wasn't just his strength, it was his steady presence, his patience, and the way he made her feel capable, even when she doubted herself. And she realized she trusted him completely, more than anyone she had ever met. The days after the storm were quieter but busy with repair. Fences needed fixing, mud had to be cleared, and the fields had to be checked for damage. Clara threw herself into the work, her muscles aching but her spirit undeterred. Jackson guided her, but he also let her make decisions and solve problems on her own. She felt her confidence growing with each task completed, knowing she could contribute meaningfully to the ranch. One evening, after a particularly long day, they sat together on the porch of the farmhouse, tired but content. Clara held a cup of warm tea, while Jackson leaned back in his chair, looking out over the fields. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden light across the land. "You handled yourself well today," Jackson said, his voice quiet but sincere. Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her. "I've learned a lot from you. I don't think I could do this without your guidance." "You've learned a lot from yourself," Jackson replied. You have strength you didn't know you had. That's what impressed me most. Clara felt a flutter in her chest. It wasn't a dramatic feeling, but it was real and comforting. She realized that Jackson's admiration didn't come from seeing her as pretty or perfect. It came from seeing her effort, her courage, and her heart. The next few weeks brought small challenges too. A delivery of feed arrived late, forcing them to ration food for the animals. A fence post rotted unexpectedly, threatening to let the cattle escape. Clara faced each problem with determination, relying on the skills she had learned and the trust she had built with Jackson. They solved each issue together, planning carefully and working side by side. Each small victory strengthened their bond. Clara also learned more about Jackson's past during this time. He spoke quietly about the responsibilities he inherited when his father passed, about the long hours and isolation he had faced, and the few people he had trusted over the years. Clara listened intently, absorbing each word. She realized that beneath his strong, quiet exterior was a man who valued honesty, loyalty, and genuine connection above all else. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fence that had been weakened by the storm, Clara slipped on a muddy slope. She tumbled, scraping her arm, and a sharp pain shot through her side. Jackson was immediately at her side, steadying her and examining the injury. "You need to rest," he said, concern in his deep voice. "Sit with me while I fix the fence." Clara shook her head stubbornly. "I can keep going. It's just a scratch." Jackson's hand rested gently on her shoulder. "No, we're a team. That means I take care of you too." Reluctantly, Clara allowed him to help her sit on a nearby log. He carefully completed the fence repair while she rested, his movements precise and efficient. She watched him work, a sense of trust and gratitude filling her heart. It was in moments like these that she realized how deeply she had come to rely on him, not just for guidance, but for support, care, and understanding. As the days passed, their friendship continued to grow into something deeper, though neither spoke of it aloud. The trust they had built was strong, unspoken, and undeniable. Clara found herself thinking of Jackson often, feeling a warmth in her chest when she saw him smile or praised her work. Jackson, too, began to notice the way he looked forward to Clara's presence, the small joys she brought into his life, and the comfort he felt simply being near her. One evening, as they prepared dinner together in the farmhouse kitchen, Clara accidentally spilled some flour across the counter. She laughed, frustrated but amused, and Jackson chuckled beside her. "You make this look fun?" he said, brushing some flour from his sleeve. Clara smiled. "It is fun. When I have the right company, at least." He didn't respond immediately, but his quiet presence spoke volumes. In that simple moment, Clara felt a connection that went beyond friendship, built on mutual respect, trust, and shared experiences. Evenings became a time of comfort and reflection. They would sit together on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills, talking quietly about dreams, memories, and hopes for the future. Clara felt more at ease with herself than ever before. She no longer doubted her worth or abilities. Jackson's steady support and belief in her had given her confidence and strength. Life at the ranch was not always easy, but it was rewarding. Each day brought new tasks, challenges, and moments of quiet joy. Clara and Jackson learned to rely on one another in ways they hadn't anticipated. They shared laughter, struggles, and quiet victories, each experience strengthening the bond between them. One particularly quiet evening, after the animals were settled and the chores completed, Clara reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the day she had arrived, shy and uncertain, unsure of her worth. Now, after weeks of shared work, trust, and care, she felt strong, confident, and valued. She realized that the bond she shared with Jackson was special, not dramatic, not rushed, but steady, reliable, and deeply meaningful. Jackson noticed the change in Clara, too. She moved with confidence, spoke with clarity, and carried herself with quiet pride. He admired her resilience, her determination, and the warmth she brought into his life. Their connection had grown naturally, rooted in trust, shared labor, and genuine care for one another. By the end of Part 3, the storm had passed, but the lessons remained. Clara and Jackson had faced trials together, supported each other through challenges, and discovered a deep bond that went beyond friendship. Their lives were intertwined now, not by grand gestures or dramatic events, but by the steady rhythm of work, trust, and shared experiences. And in that quiet, steadfast connection, Clara realized something important. True partnership was built on more than appearances or words. It was built on effort, care, and the willingness to face life's storms together. And with Jackson by her side, she felt ready for anything the future might bring. Life on the ranch had settled into a steady rhythm, but for Clara, every day brought a new sense of warmth and belonging. The days were long and full of work, yet each task was now shared with Jackson in a way that made even the hardest labor feel lighter. Feeding the animals, mending fences, preparing meals, or walking through the fields, everything felt easier and more meaningful because they did it together. Clara noticed that she began to look forward to small, ordinary moments, the sound of Jackson's boots crunching in the dirt, the quiet conversations over breakfast, the way he would watch her while she worked in the kitchen. She no longer questioned her self-worth or worried about appearances. Jackson had never once commented on how she looked. Instead, he valued her skill, her effort, and the care she put into everything she did. That simple acknowledgement gave Clara a sense of peace she had never experienced before. Jackson, too, found himself noticing the little things about Clara in ways that made his chest tighten. The way she tied her hair back before working, the small hum she made while kneading dough, the way she paused to speak softly to the animals. It all fascinated him. He admired her strength, her determination, and her gentle heart. He had been a man used to solitude, relying only on himself, but Clara's presence made the ranch feel alive in a way he hadn't expected. One morning, Clara decided to try a new recipe for breakfast, a sweet bread with cinnamon and honey. She worked in the small kitchen, mixing the dough, kneading it carefully, and humming softly to herself. Jackson wandered in quietly, leaning against the doorway and watching. "That smells amazing," he said finally, his voice calm and sincere. Clara smiled, slightly embarrassed by his praise.
I hope it tastes as good as it smells. Jackson chuckled. Knowing you, it will.
You have a way of making simple things feel special. The bread baked slowly, and soon the house was filled with its warm, sweet aroma. Clara carefully pulled it from the oven, slicing a piece for herself and one for Jackson. They ate together at the small wooden table, the morning sun streaming through the windows. The meal was quiet, simple, but it felt meaningful. It wasn't just about the food. It was about the connection, the shared moment, and the comfort of being together. As the days passed, Clara and Jackson began to share more of their thoughts, dreams, and memories. One afternoon, while resting under the shade of a large oak tree, Clara spoke about her childhood. She told Jackson about the small town she had grown up in, the family dinners she had loved, and the quiet evenings spent helping her parents in the kitchen. Jackson listened attentively, nodding occasionally, but mostly watching her with a quiet admiration that made her feel valued and understood. "You've had a full life already," he said gently, "but it feels like you've only just begun." Clara laughed softly, a little embarrassed.
Maybe.
I've always thought I'd stay quiet, do what I needed to do, and not ask for much more. Jackson's eyes softened. You deserve more than quiet. You deserve to be happy, and I can see that happiness in you now. Her heart warmed at his words. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was the kind of reassurance that mattered most, someone noticing her, appreciating her, and believing in her worth. Over the following weeks, they found small joys in everyday life. Clara taught Jackson how to bake bread, and he showed her how to repair tools and navigate the land. They spent evenings watching sunsets, sharing stories, and occasionally teasing each other about small mistakes or funny moments. Every shared laugh and quiet conversation strengthened their bond. One evening, a neighbor invited them to a small gathering in town. Clara felt nervous about attending, unsure how she would be perceived. But Jackson encouraged her quietly, holding her hand briefly before they left. You don't need to worry. Just be yourself, he said. The gathering was lively, full of townspeople sharing stories and food. Clara brought a small basket of pastries, which were quickly admired and praised. She realized that her skills, her confidence, and her genuine nature had begun to shine in ways she hadn't expected. Jackson stayed close, proud and protective, but letting her enjoy the moment fully on her own. As they walked home under the stars, Clara felt a quiet happiness. She knew that Jackson respected her and valued her, and that gave her a sense of security and belonging she had never known. She realized that she was no longer the shy, uncertain girl who had arrived at the ranch weeks ago. She was strong, capable, and appreciated for who she truly was. Back at the ranch, their evenings became moments of quiet intimacy. After long days of work, they would sit together on the porch, sharing tea or simple dinners. Clara would talk about recipes she wanted to try, and Jackson would listen, sometimes suggesting ideas or offering stories from his childhood. These small shared moments created a sense of closeness that neither had expected. One particularly quiet evening, a gentle breeze blew through the open fields. Clara was preparing a pot of stew, and Jackson leaned against the doorway, watching her with a soft smile. You make this all look so easy, he said. Clara laughed softly. It's easier when someone appreciates it. Jackson stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I do appreciate it, and I appreciate you. Clara felt her heart flutter. The words weren't dramatic or forced, but they carried a weight she could feel deep inside. She realized that the bond between them had grown into something more than friendship, something steady, comforting, and meaningful. In the following days, they began to share small gestures of care. Jackson would fetch extra water for Clara during long work sessions, and Clara would prepare small treats to brighten his day. They supported each other in ways both practical and emotional, building a connection that was quiet yet strong. One afternoon, Clara noticed Jackson staring out over the fields, deep in thought. She approached quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Everything okay? She asked softly. He looked at her and smiled faintly. Better now, he said. It's just, I've never had someone like you here. Someone I can trust and rely on completely. Clara's chest tightened. She had felt the same way for weeks, maybe longer, but hearing him say it aloud made the feeling real. I feel the same, she admitted. Being here, with you, it feels like home. Jackson's eyes softened, and for a moment they simply stood there, hand in hand, watching the fields and feeling the quiet comfort of shared understanding. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic moments, just a simple acknowledgement of the bond they had built, steady and true. Life on the ranch continued, each day filled with work, shared meals, and moments of connection. Clara and Jackson had learned to rely on each other, not just for tasks and chores, but for companionship, support, and trust. Their friendship had blossomed into a quiet, enduring love, built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and genuine care. By the end of Part 4, Clara and Jackson's connection had grown deeper and more intimate. They had faced challenges together, laughed and worked side by side, and discovered the joy of trusting and caring for someone fully. The ranch, once a place of hard work and solitude, had become a home filled with warmth, companionship, and the quiet magic of everyday life. And as they stood together on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Clara realized something important. Love didn't always come in dramatic moments or grand gestures. Sometimes it grew quietly, steadily, in the shared labor of daily life, in the simple gestures of care, and in the trust built through time. And with Jackson by her side, she knew she had found something rare, precious, and true. The seasons were changing at the ranch. The air had grown crisp, and the fields glowed with the golden light of late afternoon. Clara had settled fully into ranch life, and Jackson had come to rely on her in ways he had never imagined possible. They worked together effortlessly, their bond stronger than ever. It wasn't just about the chores or the animals anymore. It was about being there for each other every single day. One morning, Clara was preparing breakfast. She had baked a fresh loaf of bread and fried eggs, and the smell of warm butter and sizzling food filled the small farmhouse. Jackson entered quietly, pausing in the doorway to watch her move with ease and confidence. The simple sight of her hands moving skillfully, her focused expression, made his chest tighten. He didn't say anything at first. He simply watched. Clara noticed his gaze and smiled softly. "Hungry?" she asked. Jackson nodded, walking over and sitting at the wooden table. "I'm starving. And you know, it smells incredible in here." Clara laughed lightly. "It tastes even better than it smells." "I promise." They ate together, the morning sunlight pouring through the window. The conversation was easy, filled with quiet laughter and gentle teasing. It had always been this way between them, natural, effortless, and full of warmth. But on this morning, Clara noticed a change. Jackson's words lingered differently, and his smile carried a depth she hadn't quite felt before. After breakfast, they moved outside to continue the ranch work. Clara fed the horses while Jackson repaired a section of the fence that had been weakened by recent winds. The work was tiring, but there was a sense of contentment that neither could deny. They moved together almost like a dance, instinctively knowing what the other would do. At one point, Jackson paused and looked at Clara. "You know," he began, his voice quiet but steady, "I've been thinking a lot lately." Clara wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him. "Curious. About what?" "About how much this ranch, this life, and you mean to me," he said slowly. "I've spent so long doing everything alone, thinking I had to handle it all myself. But you've changed everything. You've brought warmth, laughter, and care into my life in ways I didn't know I needed." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had felt the same way for months, but hearing him speak it aloud made it real. "I feel the same," she admitted softly. "I never imagined I could feel this, connected to someone. I didn't think I belonged anywhere, but here, with you, it feels right." Jackson's gaze softened, and he stepped closer. "Clara, I don't need anything else. You're enough for me. You always have been." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but they were tears of happiness, relief, and love. She had spent so long doubting herself, believing she wasn't pretty or worthy, but in this moment she understood that her value had never been about appearance. It had been about her heart, her effort, and the love she could give. And Jackson saw all of that. He valued her for exactly who she was. Without another word, they embraced. It wasn't dramatic or exaggerated, just a quiet, heartfelt moment, full of trust and genuine affection. Clara rested her head on Jackson's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Jackson held her gently, feeling a deep sense of peace. They had found something rare and true, built not on fleeting attraction or dramatic gestures, but on respect, care, and shared life experiences. The weeks that followed were filled with small joys that made their connection stronger. Clara continued to cook, experimenting with new recipes and delighting Jackson with her creations. Jackson, in turn, ensured she had what she needed for her work, always noticing the little things that made her life easier. They repaired fences together, tended the fields, and fed the animals. But every task was now a shared adventure. Each day reinforced the bond they had built, reminding them of the quiet love that had grown between them. One evening, Clara prepared a special dinner. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the fields. She had cooked Jackson's favorite meal, roast chicken with vegetables, fresh bread, and a small apple pie for dessert. The farmhouse was cozy and warm, the aroma of food filling the air. Jackson watched her move around the kitchen, admiring the way she worked. "You never cease to amaze me," he said quietly. Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her. "I just like to make people happy, and I like making you happy." Jackson set down his glass and took her hands in his.
You do more than that, Clara. You make my life better, brighter, and more meaningful than I ever thought possible.
"I don't just care about you. I love you." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them.
"I love you too," she whispered.
That night they sat together on the porch after dinner, watching the stars emerge in the sky. The ranch was quiet except for the distant lowing of cows and the soft rustle of the wind. They held hands, talking softly about hopes, dreams, and the life they wanted to build together. The connection between them was no longer just friendship or trust. It was love, steady and true, growing naturally from the life they had shared. The following days were filled with planning for the future. They spoke about maintaining the ranch, expanding the garden, and perhaps one day having a small home together. But even in these plans, the focus was never on material things. It was on sharing life, supporting each other, and continuing the quiet, meaningful partnership they had developed. Clara noticed how different she felt now. She no longer doubted her worth or worried about whether she was enough. She had learned that true love and respect came from being seen and valued for who she truly was. Jackson had shown her that, and in return she had shown him how to open his heart and embrace companionship fully. One afternoon, while walking through the fields, they came across a young foal that had been born recently. Clara laughed softly, kneeling to pet the tiny animal. "It's amazing," she said, smiling at Jackson. "Life keeps finding ways to surprise us." Jackson nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And we get to face it together." In that moment, everything felt right. The ranch, the animals, the work, and most importantly, each other. Their love was quiet but profound, built on shared experiences, trust, and care. It was a love that would last, steady and unwavering, grounded in the everyday moments that mattered most. Even on the hardest days, when chores were exhausting or the weather was harsh, Clara and Jackson found comfort in each other. They had learned that life wasn't about perfection or grand gestures. It was about patience, understanding, and the willingness to face life's challenges together. That lesson had brought them closer than they had ever imagined. As the sun set over the rolling fields one evening, Clara rested her head on Jackson's shoulder. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, the world calm and peaceful. Jackson wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "You're home?" he said quietly. Clara smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I am," she replied. "With you."
And so, life on the ranch continued.
They worked, laughed, shared meals, and faced challenges together, each day strengthening the bond that had grown slowly and naturally between them. Clara had learned to value herself, not for how she looked, but for the heart and effort she put into life. Jackson had learned to open his heart, trusting and loving someone fully. Their story was not about drama or grand gestures. It was about love built on trust, respect, and shared life. And in that quiet, steady connection, Clara and Jackson had found something rare, beautiful, and true. They had discovered that love didn't need to be flashy. It only needed to be real. In the comfort of the ranch, with the animals nearby and the open sky above, they had found their home, their partnership, and their happiness. And as they watched the sun disappear behind the hills, hand in hand, they knew that together they could face whatever life had in store. It had started with a simple truth. Clara had said, "I ain't pretty, but I can cook. That's enough for me." That simple, honest exchange had grown into a life filled with trust, companionship, and love, the kind of love that endures quietly through every storm and every sunny day.